Hello, good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for episode 23 of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud, where today we are joined by Dave Burnison from our GitHub team to discuss GitHub Advanced Security. But before we jump into the tech, Dave, welcome. How are you?
Hey, doing great, Niles. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where and when you're watching this. So excited to be here today.
Cool. And I am very excited to learn a little bit more about GitHub later on. But Dave, why don't you tell us something about yourself first?
All right, so I've been at Microsoft and GitHub 6.5 years. I'm a DevOps junkie. I'm into everything DevOps. So been dealing with Team Foundation Server, VSTS, Azure DevOps for years. Actually brought over to the GitHub team 2.5 years ago. So now I'm an enterprise technical advocate there. Love talking to customers about all things GitHub and DevOps and everything. And yeah, I've been living out here in the Pacific Northwest for the last couple of years. So love the climate out here, getting out and seeing the mountains and getting out and doing some hikes and things like that. So life's good these days. Life's good.
Nice. What's one of the nicest hikes you've done in the Pacific Northwest?
Actually, one of the really nice ones is Discovery Park right there in Seattle, right on Puget Sound. About a 5 mile hike with a fair amount of ups and downs. You get right on the beach. You can see across the sound to the Olympic Mountains and everything. Just a beautiful hike for being close by and everything.
Yeah, I'm looking it up on Google Maps right now, and it looks to be so close to the city. Maybe next time I'm out here, I'll be
Exactly.
there.
Yeah. It's really, really accessible. Yeah, you don't have to go on some 2 hour drive just to get to a nice, beautiful hike.
Yeah, I can see that. And you did mention that you started off your DevOps journey with the old Team Foundation server, and you slowly graduated into Azure DevOps. How has the transition to GitHub been for you?
It's been very natural. It's kind of been, the natural evolution, with Microsoft acquiring GitHub and putting so much, leveraging the world's largest developer platform and investing in the world's largest developer platform and everything. It's been very much a natural progression for me. So.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And today you had something for us called GitHub Advanced Security. So not even regular security, but advanced. What's that all about?
Well, security is at the forefront of everybody's mind these days, right? And there's lots of different areas that we have to be conscious of. Not only the code that we're writing, but everybody's pulling in code through open source these days, and that's great. But pulling in all these open source packages, then you can focus on the code that makes your solution unique and different from your competitors. But we got to make sure all those open source packages that we're pulling in are free of vulnerabilities in that. And so I'll talk about how GitHub can help you do that, how GitHub can help you make the code that you're writing secure. And boy, it'd be interesting if we were very interactive here to say how many in the audience, raise your hand if you ever inadvertently checked in a login or a password or authentication token. Yep, exactly. And we help keep those out of your code base now, so you're not opening up your systems to hackers and things like that.
And then all of that is part of what you call GitHub Advanced Security?
Some of that's part of GitHub Enterprise Core, and then some of it's part of GitHub Advanced Security. And I'll clarify what's what as we go through things here today.
Okay. That sounds more than reasonable because I have definitely noticed a trend in the open source community in the past, I'd say the past year or 2 years, where the focus on security has grown significantly. I think certain projects within the Kubernetes ecosystem with a SIG store about image signing and related technologies, and I think SBOM's software bill of materials are coming live.
Yep.
And I think that trend of security throughout open source is really something we're seeing more often.
Well, and it's not something necessarily that developers want to deal with, but these days you pretty much have to deal with it because if you get in a situation where your systems are breached man, that can damage your company's reputation. It can cost you millions of dollars and things. So if right inside the developer workflow, you can be alerted to and fix and remediate these security issues, it's just going to make your life a lot easier in the long run. And give all of your stakeholders, your company, your customers, make them all feel better about your systems, and provide more trust and everything in your systems.
And then you did mention enterprise earlier, and then there's also GitHub, like the true community around GitHub with the actual open source. How do I look at all of these security features across what might be closed source software versus the open source in GitHub?
So actually, if you're working on public repositories, open source repositories, all of these features are free. As you get into dealing with private repositories, you can choose the GitHub Team plan or the GitHub Enterprise plan. And then when you're working with GitHub Enterprise, some of these features are part of the core. Some of these features are part of the add-on GitHub Advanced Security. And like I say, as we get going here, I'll kind of go ahead and dive in, and start talking about this and talk about, what's what when it comes to the security features.
Let's dive in.
So, Microsoft invested in GitHub because Microsoft's mission statement is that we want to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Well, how can we empower the most developers? Well, that's to leverage and invest in the largest developer platform on earth. There's now over 83 million developers registered on GitHub today, and that 90% of the Fortune 100 companies are using GitHub today. And if you haven't taken a look at GitHub in the last few years, it has grown tremendously. Features like code spaces and GitHub Actions and Copilot, are things that we've added within the last couple of years. But we've also had a huge focus on security. And that's where I'm going to focus the conversation here today, talking about Dependabot and code scanning and secret scanning and the security overview and everything. And we kind of, highlight here what's part of GitHub Advanced Security, and then the other things are part of just core GitHub and GitHub Enterprise in that. So as we dive in and look at these things specifically, just kind of set the stage here. Like we talked about, everybody's pulling in open source packages through NPM, NuGet, Maven, things like that. So, you can work with existing user interface frameworks and things like that. So you can focus on the code that makes your solution unique. But you want to make sure that all of those dependencies are free of security vulnerabilities. You don't want a vulnerability in some package that you're pulling in or some package that package is pulling in to have a security vulnerability. So as soon as you push your code to GitHub, Dependabot's checking for vulnerabilities. I'll go into that in a little more detail in a moment. But there's other things too. Like we talked about, exposing access tokens or hard-coded passwords or authentication tokens and things like that. Unsafe coding patterns. It's so hard being a developer today when it comes to security. We can't be a security expert in every area, but if we can leverage tools like CodeQL, then that can help us tell us when did we introduce a pattern of code that might lead to a SQL injection or cross-site scripting issues or something along those lines. And then also, not every company has the luxury of having security researchers on staff. So how can you leverage the work of security researchers from not only GitHub, but other companies like Microsoft, Google, and Uber? We'll talk about that. And then we know that the damage is exponentially greater as you go out here. The further down the pipeline you get, the more expensive it gets to fix and remediate security issues here. So the idea is we want to shift security as far left as possible. There's lots of tools out there that you can put into your Jenkins build or your Azure pipelines or Travis CI or whatever. But we want to talk about shifting security all the way to the left. As soon as you push code to GitHub, let's make sure that the dependencies don't have any vulnerabilities in there. As soon as you're pushing code to GitHub, let's make sure you're not including those passwords or authentication tokens or anything along those lines.
So what you're saying is, with shifting left, you're not even focusing on the build, you're going pre-build. As code is being checked in, you're already doing the reviews.
Exactly. So yeah, as soon as I'm pushing code up, there's parts of it that run during the pull request builds and that, so you can identify and remediate security issues even before the code hits your main branch for the very first time. And the first area to talk about here is Dependabot. Now, as soon as I push code to GitHub, Dependabot's going to look at all the open source packages that are, like if I'm using NuGet, it's going to look at that packages config file and look at all the dependencies that I'm pulling in. And it'll say things like, oh, I see you're using version 3.3 of Bootstrap. Here, let me go over here and look in the GitHub advisory database. And you know what? We see that version 3.3 of Bootstrap has this known security vulnerability in it. And so we'll alert you to that, but we can even go a step further. We can say, hey, our advisory database also tells us if you would upgrade to version 3.4 or higher of Bootstrap, then you're going to be free of that vulnerability. So let's update that packages config file to point to that newer version and put that in a pull request. By putting it in a pull request, then I'm going to leverage my branch protection rules, which are going to kick off a build and run all my unit tests and everything. So then by Dependabot making this little change over here, I can be assured that that it's not breaking something else in another area because I have good code coverage in my tests and everything like that. And Dependabot it's free for any public repositories you're working on, and it's included with GitHub Enterprise. And then the next area to talk about is code scanning. So the piece of GitHub that works on this is called CodeQL, and that QL stands for query language. So here we want to run a process that turns the code into data, and then we can query that data, hence the query language. We can query that data for patterns of code that might lead to security vulnerabilities, such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting issues, other vulnerabilities that are found in the OWASP top 10, and things like that. And the way this works, it works right inside of the developer workflow. So as I'm looking at even a pull request, when I'm looking at the lines changed, I'll see an alert similar to this. And this alert will also give me additional information on details about that vulnerability and how I can change my code to eliminate that pattern that leads to the vulnerability and things like that.
And Dave, a question here for you is, as I hear about query language, it makes it sound like I have to write the queries. Are there some out-of-the-box scans that GitHub does for me so I don't have to write in everything myself?
Yep. And I'm going to touch on that in just a second. The one point I want to bring up here too is, so yes, we open sourced CodeQL. So there's queries that come from the GitHub security research team, but there's also queries that come from other security research teams as well. So we've open sourced it, but also we didn't just make this a product, we made it a platform. So you can actually plug in and use other tools like Snyk or Veracode or Prisma to scan infrastructure as code files and things like that, and have those results show up right inside the same workflow as well. Now, talking about writing those queries, yeah, there's thousands of queries that the GitHub security research team has created, but we've got contributions from security researchers from Microsoft, Google, Uber, and other companies. And there was an awesome session this last year at um, uh, GitHub Universe, where Josh Brown White, one of the principal security engineers, I believe is his title, talked about how Microsoft wrote CodeQL queries to hunt for SolaraGate information. So now, as a development team, you're leveraging the work of the Microsoft security research team as well as the GitHub security research team. And then you can learn the CodeQL language yourself and write additional queries. And maybe they're not security related queries. Maybe you just want to do some additional code linting and things like that. So yeah, you've got the power to leverage all of this work of others, plus add your own work as well.
And so
And
this is a layered cake of scanning abilities. Just wondering if a company were to write a custom code scan that they want to contribute back to the community, is that also possible?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, if I out here to github.com slash, I believe it is CodeQL. Yeah, there's the, oh, am I in the right place? No. I need to be in. Yes, GitHub's organization, and then in the GitHub CodeQL repository. And when you go out here, yeah, how do I learn CodeQL and run queries? And here's all, you can dive into the contribution guides and that so that you can learn how to contribute queries yourself. So yeah, github.com, GitHub organization, CodeQL repo to learn how to do all of that.
That's cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. And yeah, just to be clear, code scanning is part of the GitHub Advanced Security piece. Again, free for any open source projects and things like that. The next area to talk about here is secret scanning. And it's more than just logins and passwords. It's personal access tokens. It's authentication tokens if you're using something like, if your system uses something like Stripe for credit card processing, or if you're deploying to an Azure web app, there's an Azure web app publish profile that has to be stored somewhere. We'll recognize when things like that are in there. And we actually work with more than 50 different providers, and this list of providers just continues to grow. You know, here's some examples here, whether it's Azure or other third-party clouds, Stripe, Atlassian, HashiCorp, if you're using Terraform and things like that. But we know what the patterns of their secrets look like, so we can identify those. And you know, we've had some awesome updates just recently. About just shy of 3 months ago, we actually changed it so that not only does this run like within your pull request builds and things like that, but now we will actually proactively prevent secret leaks. And what this is, there's a number of those patterns that we're really highly confident. You know, because one of the things about the code security tools of GitHub, we really try to minimize the number of false positives that you hit. So as you're pushing code to GitHub now with this secret push protection, if we see what we think is a highly confident secret, we'll actually block that push from getting into GitHub in the first place. So, you know, I'm not sure how you can shift it any further left than that.
Yeah, so if I just clarify what you're saying here, what you mean is you can scan for a secret before a push is actually accepted on the repo. So, but what I typically do when I commit a secret to Git, which I have to admit I do more often than I care for, is
Yep.
you do a new commit and you actually remove the secret in the new commit. But if you go through your GitHub history, the secret's still there in the old commit. If you do it this way, you can actually avoid it ever being in the public, just in your repo.
Exactly. And you know, that brings up a good point, because one of the things, one of the things that's out there, if we look at our roadmap and everything, there's things out there in the roadmap where not only are we going to be scanning code, but we're going to be scanning history and scanning issues and things like that. And I believe that is out here under the some of the future work. Yeah, extending the coverage. Yeah, we're extending the coverage in. So there it is. First quarter of next year, scan issues, discussions, pull requests. We'll even be scanning GitHub Actions logs and things like that in the future as well. So yeah, lots of continuing to add depth to our security scans and everything. So a couple of other things that we've recently shipped. And this has been, what was it, about 9-10 months ago now, but deep integration with things like Okta and Azure Active Directory. So making sure that every user that's in GitHub is directly tied to an Azure Active Directory user, and making sure, and then also being able to leverage Azure Active Directory groups. So if you and I are working on the team together, and we're part of the application A team, there's a group for that. We give access to the application A group to our repository, and then you win the lotto and decide you're going to leave the company as soon as Microsoft takes you out of that Active Directory group. Then you'll also, your access to the repository will be removed, and things like that. So making it very easy for enterprises, to manage security, but also be highly confident in how they're managing access to everything as well. And another key thing for enterprises is custom repository roles. And historically, GitHub had, I think it was 5 roles for triage, write access, things like that. But now you can create your own custom repository roles. So maybe you've got that typical write access for developers, but then maybe you've got your power users or that you need to give some level of admin access, but not complete admin access. And you can leverage custom roles to do that kind of a thing now. So this is some of these things are bringing more and more enterprise chops, so to speak, to the GitHub offerings. Even things like audit logging and things like that, so that you can see everybody that's touching your repos and things. All right, let me kind of skip ahead here. How about I do a quick demo here to run through some of these things?
We love demos. It's sad that Mike's not on here because he would be jumping right now at the sound of demo.
All right. Well, let me get over to my. All right, so I'm going to start out here. Now, this is looking inside of my organization. So I've got a GitHub Enterprise Cloud organization just for my demo environments and that. I've got several repositories in here. But when I go to the security tab here, I can see all of those Dependabot alerts, those code scanning alerts, those secret scanning alerts across all of my different repositories here. And I can see the breakdown and everything. And also, since GitHub Advanced Security is something you add on, you can see where has this been enabled. Are there other repositories where we need to go turn it on and enable that? Or are some of those repositories maybe just some internal applications that we're not as concerned about security just yet, kind of a thing. So I get that this is kind of that security team or management team overview of security. But if I go into one of my specific repositories, like if I go into Parts Unlimited here, and actually I want to just go to the main page of Parts Unlimited, right here is where we begin to see things up in the developer workflow. I can go to the security overview for a repository and dive in and see my Dependabot alerts or my secret scanning alerts or whatnot. But one of the powers of the security tools is they show up right inside the developer workflow. And even
Yeah,
from me, when, yeah,
they're
go ahead.
the first thing you see.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, I come in here because, I need to do some work, but I see this, I can dive in here and say, okay, what's this all about? Well, I've actually got multiple ones here, but let's focus in on this one for Bootstrap here. And, it's telling me, kind of like I was saying in the example earlier, the versions 3.7 to 3.4.1, 3.37 to 4.1 have this known issue with the cross-site scripting is possible in the tooltip or popover data template attribute. And this information is coming from the GitHub advisory database. But not only is Dependabot alerting me to this, it's going to go ahead and create a pull request. And in that pull request, it's updating my packages config file. And what it's going to do there is just point me to a version of Bootstrap that GitHub knows no longer has that particular vulnerability. And as a developer, really all I need to do is go and kind of review, this one doesn't have a compatibility score, but I should be okay there. But I can also go down here and review. It kicked off a build, and in my build I've got a bunch of unit tests, and I'm verifying my ARM templates and all that. So I can come in here, and if I've got good coverage on my unit tests, I see that everything is passed, then I'm confident that this change isn't going to break something else in the code base. So then I can just go ahead and squash and merge that change into my code base, and okay, little effort, I've avoided that security issue now.
Yep. So what you're saying here is Dependabot will see the issue, it will propose a fix, and then if you have the right CI/CD setup or GitHub Actions, or even if you have it integrated with Azure DevOps or Travis CI.
Yep, Azure pipelines or anything else. Yep.
Yes. If you have that set up and you cover your tests, it's not fully automatic, but at least you know that what Dependabot is proposing likely won't break anything if the tests all go through.
Exactly. Now let's talk about how CodeQL shows up right inside of the developer workflow. And for that, I'm going to go over to actually one of my closed pull requests because I recently did some work. I needed to update branding for our website. For those of you that have read the Phoenix project, my demo website is working on the Parts Unlimited e-commerce site. And we're not Fabricam, we're Contoso. So I had to go through and make some changes to do all of that rebranding and stuff. And I did that here inside of this pull request. And the way CodeQL works is it will even highlight right inside of the pull request. So I made some changes here, to change things over to Contoso and that. And right here, it's telling me, hey, you've got a potential pattern of code that could lead to a vulnerability. And, as developers, I wrote the code, you're reviewing it. We may not fully understand what the issue is here, but we can dive into the details. And CodeQL is going to tell us, all right, you really need to add this validate anti-forgery token attribute in here. You only have this HTTP post attribute. And a whole kind of example of, okay, here's an example of what the bad code looks like. The good code would look something like this, additional validate anti-forgery token in here. So, it's alerting me to the problem. It's educating me on the problem. It's, this was inside of, this code was in a feature branch. Now it's giving us the opportunity to fix this before we even merge code into our main branch at the first time, for the first time. And
you finish your thought first. I'll ask my questions in a second.
No, I was about to shift into just another little part of the demo. So go ahead if you've got a question here.
But I noticed that this is now this appears to be C# code. Which languages is CodeQL supported in?
Great question. So if I go over to the code scanning alerts, go into view alerts, this is where I can also set up this. You would go here to set up code scanning originally, but that also, if we zoom in here, we can see C, C++, C#, Go, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, and Ruby are the languages that we support right now. And if we go out to that roadmap again, we'd see that we're working on support for Kotlin and Swift, that's coming down the pipe. But you'll notice where we're at this, choosing a workflow for security, it's not just CodeQL that we have as options here. We've got options for Fortify and Sonar Cloud and Veracode and SNCC and all of these other tools. Let's talk about, okay, what if I need to do code scanning for a different language, or I want to do code scanning for infrastructure as code kind of a thing. I can pull in like Prisma. So now I can scan my ARM templates, my Terraform files, and things like that. And the results from those code scans will show up in the security overview and in your pull requests and things like that. So now you don't have to go over here to some dashboard for Prisma and over here for the dashboard for GitHub Advanced Security and all that. We pull it all together under one umbrella.
Makes total sense.
All right, so the next place I was going to go here with this was saying, okay, you might want to take those security issues that you're finding. So get back to that particular security issue. And not only do you want to track that here, you also want to track that where you're doing your planning and tracking and things. And so you can turn a security issue into a regular GitHub issue here and then have access to all of this. But coming over from Microsoft, I'm still using Azure boards, for my full enterprise level planning and tracking and everything. So this is where actually GitHub Actions comes into play. I've got an action. So yeah, I'm doing my builds and deployments with GitHub Actions now, but I've got this other action that syncs security issues or syncs issues from GitHub over to Azure boards, since that's where I'm doing all of my planning and tracking. And now if I look at, there's integrations here where I can have a status badge for my Kanban board right here. And if I go and look at that Kanban board, not only am I going to see, the product backlog items and the tasks and things related to that work that we were doing, and that'll pop up here in just a second. Here we go. Just giving that a second to fill in. So yeah, this is the product backlog item we were working on. And we can see, there's the link back to that pull request and everything. But if I go over here and look at these red items, I've got rules that say, hey, it's tagged as a security issue, make the card red, and here's that issue we were just looking at GitHub. And there's the link back to that actual issue and everything. So by now having these security issues surface right here in my Kanban board, we're probably going to want to say, you know what, we need to reprioritize some things here and finish fixing these security issues before we fix all of the the feature work and things like that. So yeah, those are some of the things I wanted to highlight today with going through the demo and everything here. I guess the only other one to talk about would be, provide an example here. Yeah, if I'm looking at my security overview, yeah, you can also see, your security scanning alerts and everything. So I can easily drill into those, or secret scanning alerts, I meant to say, and yeah, there's examples where it caught me putting a Azure DevOps personal access token because I was going to put in some logic that said, hey, when we find a bug, or a broken test, I should say, a broken automated test, let's turn that into a bug in Azure DevOps. So, I needed a personal access token to do that. But now it's saying, nope, you don't want to do that. So that's my key or my trigger to say, hey, let's go store that either in something like Azure Key Vault, or maybe I want to go put something like that in, the GitHub Actions store here, for to make sure that's stored in an encrypted way and things like that.
As it should be.
So I know I've been running on and on here, but I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover in the demo here today. What do you think? What do you think about all this now?
I think this is fantastic. Like, security is so key, and I think the things you highlighted really show how you can start shifting that left. Definitely, the demo you showed with CodeQL, that isn't something you would even catch in a build necessarily. That's something that you would catch like 10 months down the line when somebody figures out the back door in your application.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. By bringing things into the developer workflow, quite honestly, what's going to happen initially when you turn these things on is you're probably going to see a flood of security issues out there. But one of the things we did here at Microsoft internally on what I know about the Azure DevOps team, they had kind of this scorecard that kept track of, okay, we know we've got security issues out there. We got to fix all the high priority ones as soon as we can. But then let's commit to saying we're going to allocate, so many developer hours per sprint to keep knocking down that list, so that we can balance new feature work and security work. And then once you get those addressed, now it just becomes naturally part of the developer workflow. As new issues come up, just knock them off as they come up. And then you're going to be highly confident that your code's secure, and your customers are going to be able to trust you even more because you can prove to them that you're proactively addressing all of those security issues and things.
Yeah, makes total sense. And what you just explained makes me think about the Phoenix project, the book as well, where initially it seems like there's a lot more work to do things right, but once you're doing things right, it saves you so much time down the end.
Exactly. And like we showed on that one graphic, it can be so cheap and inexpensive to address that security issue right there in the developer phase, as opposed to if it gets all the way out to production, or if you actually have a breach, that can cost you millions of dollars just for a single incident.
Yep.
So
cool. So I want to thank you, Dave, for sharing everything with us. Our friend Matt Calder has actually posted a lot of the links that you showed in the chat here. So people who are catching up on this will find all the links in the live chat transcript. But Dave, thank you for joining us. And everybody who watched along this far, thank you as well for staying with us for episode 23 of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud. And we'll see you again in about 2 weeks' time. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks for having me today. Look forward to talking to you again.